May 2015. We have been in the market for 1.5 years. We got the first bunch of customers. We were kind of running out of money. 90 days left, and we had 60 days left, and we had 30 days left, and it got pretty ugly. If you think of all the families and the people working in the company, you are the only one seeing the bank account going down, down, down. It forces you to think about better ways to do business. And for example, in that specific case, what we did is
David, it's so good to be talking with you again. I thought today maybe we could start more at the beginning of your story.
Yeah, sure.
How you came to be in a position to share so much advice with people and help them on their own journeys. To that end, I wanted to talk a little bit about how you decided to start a business and how you knew that you wanted to run something and build something rather than work for somebody else.
Oh yeah, that's interesting. Let's do it. So something specific you want to know?
Like what was that first spark that made you think that you could build a business?
So basically I was always doing stuff to earn some money, right? Financing the studies and everything. And I had the chance to have several side jobs doing my studies, like creating websites. We did a school that teaches like old people how to use a phone, for example, and we rented like bars and restaurants and everything for teaching people how to use their Nokia and their Samsung phones, Siemens, right? Nokia and Siemens phones in that time. And yeah, then I actually got into a big car manufacturing company doing my studies, to doing like a practical half year. And I actually realized that that's probably not mine, because like every department was like working on their own, and they seemed not to have like this big common goal where all of them working towards, and they seemed to care more about like their own good. And yeah, for me that was not the kind of thing where I wanted to be, but that was like probably the thing where I said, hey, let's build a company on my own, and let's build a company people actually love to work in, and I love to work in myself as well. And yeah, that's how I got started. So always doing some side hustles, but basically then it was never a decision to join a big company or a big corporate. It was more of the adventure, right? It was always like creating something, figuring it out on myself, and trying to get into the adventure and learn by doing. And that was always something I really enjoyed, because you learn more if you just do it, right? People can teach you all the time and tell you the right direction, how to do it in the best, fast way, how to earn like as much money as quick as possible. But in the end, it might even be better not to choose the direct line, because there's so much you have to learn along the way. And if you don't follow the straight line, there's so many information, so many experience you can gather. So I really enjoyed that one.
What's one of your most unexpected zigzags? Instead of following the straight line, right? We all have interesting things that we go and do, whether it's our professional path or on the side. What was one of the most interesting that you didn't think might be exactly where you would end up?
So I think that there have been so many different zigzags. So probably everything, right? Financing in the business was a zigzag. Creating our first product was a zigzag, because we started out building something different, right? And then figured out that probably won't create the business I was looking forward to. Then we pivoted to something in the same area with the same technology, but it's a different product. So probably that's something that was unexpected, because when we built the first agency, we were thinking about which product we should choose in order to build the business we wanted to build. Then we started through with this social media thing, which was a completely different thing than it is today. And we figured out after like closing the first 4 or 5 customers that this actually won't create the business we are looking forward to, right? Because it was project business all over again. And we wanted to create a product business which scales with the customers, and where you can create one value product and like sell it over again to solve the problem of the customers, and narrowing down and focusing on this one. And that's probably one of the zigzags that we took. So yeah, it's always good to go with the flow. Sometimes life tells you where not to go.
I think that decision to go from, I think you said, a project business to a product business is so instructive about your journey, right? And it's quite a pivot, and it really brings you to where you are today. So I want to talk a little bit, if you can, about how you came to that idea that it was time to really change your model. That's a big risk to take, right? To really redirect the company. And so talk a little bit about how you got there, because I think your thought process and your journey to that decision, maybe people who are watching don't have exactly the same business or exactly the same decision to make, but the things that you considered could really be instructive for them.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting story, because in the beginning we did what we did best, right? Creating websites. That's how I financed my studies, and we then built more websites, bigger websites, right? And we started with small bakeries and ended up with big car manufacturers and banks we built websites for. And along the way we learned a lot, but it was like hopping from one project to the next one in this agency business, digital agency business. And I think it's an amazing business to learn, because if you have so many different projects, so many different customers and different industries people can come from, it helps you to really understand like the companies out there, and that every company is kind of similar and kind of different, right, in how they do stuff. And so it's a great thing to really get a fast ramp up and learn how they do business, what they expect from you. And then I realized that might not be true for other agencies, but I think most of the agency owners I know, they all have the same struggles. They initially don't scale above the one person or the two people that started it, right? They might have some employees, some developers, some designers, assistants, maybe a project manager, right? But once they want to do multiple projects and streamline them, either they get an operational problem because they can't handle that many different projects at the same time, or they get a sales and marketing problem because they cannot acquire more customers in a faster pace to fuel their operations team. And that was probably our issue at that time, because most of the customers came out of my network, right? So I met them at conferences or at talks I gave, or like people that knew me and knew that we were building quite a cool websites, right? They came, hey, can you build this website? Or other agencies that say, hey, we know you can help us here. It's a big project. We can't do it alone. Can you jump in and we do it together, right? Share the revenue, for example. And that's like how almost every of the business came into the company. And then you hit this point where you say, okay, how do I scale this, right? Do I have to do more marketing? Do I have to do more sales? And then you have to find other people who follow a structured process in order to make it happen. But at that time, I actually didn't know how to do that, right? I had no idea how to build a sales process. I was good at selling, but I didn't know how to teach others how to hire good salespeople and how to distinguish them from the good and the bad, right? Or people that have a different skill set that might make them great sales reps at different companies, but not for the agency business. And yes, then you have this problem with the recurring revenue, right? You have this big project and you close it and you do it and deliver it and you get a bunch of money. And then you are down to zero, right? And you have to acquire the next customer and hop from one to the next project. And it's not the way I wanted to build a business, which was like kind of foreseeable with recurring revenue, where you have some kind of sustainability in there, and where you can actually, if you hire more people, you can be honest about they will have a job tomorrow, right? And it didn't feel like that in the agency business, because it was hopping from one thing to the other. And then this kind of mindset switch has to appear from, okay, I'm doing this one project and now I have to build a product which is kind of the same for every customer. So you're not allowed to customize it for everyone in the same way that we did the websites before. And you kind of have to figure out a pain or a gain that you're solving that is similar for all those customers out there that you want to target, and then solving this pain for all of them, right? Maybe growing and maturing the product, but don't create like tens of different products to solve the customer's needs, because then you have an agency business again and not a product business. And yeah, that kind of mindset switch, this took me a long time. It's nothing you do from one day to another. Maybe there are people faster than me, but yeah, this is kind of, it's a big thing. And then we burned all the boats, and we like handed over all the customers from our agency business, which were probably 100, to other companies. Said, hey, can you maybe help this customer out for the next years? And we want to do something different. And they happily took them over into their business. And we started with zero revenue and took a loan and actually built a product.
I think one of the things that we've talked about, messaged about, I think you even used this phrase as well, is you had to stop trading time money, right? You had
Yes.
to have to come up with a model that you could scale.
Because if you sell all your time, nothing is left, right? How do you work on the business if you sold all your time?
Who helped you along the way? I can't imagine that all of these ideas and that this influence came just from your point of view and from what you were seeing in the business. And I think one of the things that I see for founders and business owners is that it can be lonely there, right? You don't have peers in your company. And so who was a resource for you, particularly when thinking about these huge decisions of how to pivot your company?
So I was really lucky because I started with two partners, right? Two co-founders, two best friends of mine, which is probably something people advise you not to do. But I think it's two sides, because on the one hand side, choosing the people who are the best fit in terms of skills and everything might be a great choice. For example, if you're looking for a talented co-founder from the tech space or from financing or whatever, then this is only true as long as you don't pivot the business, right? And if you start with friends who actually care about, have the same drive, the same ambition like you, then it makes things easier because you can share the pain and discuss it. And maybe you have like a bottle of wine once in a while and like share the pain and talk about how could a solution look like. But on the other side, you have people to talk about. So I never felt lonely. I think there was just one or two times where I actually felt lonely because one of them got burned out for quite a while and then came back, and he took his a little bit of a break, which was amazing. I think it was the right decision for him. But in that time, I felt a little bit lonely, but I always had like great mentors. I read tons of books. I watched lots of YouTube videos. Maybe there weren't enough YouTube videos out there at that time, but I got to conferences, listened to a lot of people, talked to other entrepreneurs, joined some peer groups. And I had this one great mentor, which was called Christian Ehl. And he had an agency business and was a business angel in product companies. So I actually knew how to build a product company. And I think I went there like at least once a month, maybe as often as he could have me. And just for a walk, I said, Chris, can we have a walk? And said, okay, I don't have any time, but we could use my lunch break. I don't eat. So let's use the lunch break, go for a walk. And then I asked him all those questions. And probably he told me all this. Most of the time he told me, your customers probably have all the answers you need, David. And you just have to figure out a way how to get those answers. And so talking to the customers, to your customers, actually was like the best advice. It's so simple, but it's like, except for pricing, this is almost always true. So just by talking to them and not talking about the solution, but talking about the core pain, the problem, where they want to go, where they struggle with, right? And you get all the insights. And they tell you, if you honestly ask them whether A or B is like a better version or has more value. So like listening to your customers and talking to them because they have all the answers was a really valuable advice, and so many more.
What was your customer's reaction when you went to them and said, we're going to change this. I'm going to refer you out to other agencies that will handle this business, and we're going to focus on this. What was that reaction?
So sometimes some of them even text me now and ask for help, but I said, sorry, like this was 10 years ago. But at that case, they understood. So we wrote an email and then we called like most of them and talked it through. And like we actually made sure that we could refer them to some really great companies. So I think there weren't any issues. So this is the most important thing. So handing them over to somebody they can actually trust. But if you change your business and you deprioritize them, I think it would be like the biggest failure would be trying to handle both businesses at the same time, and then they feel like they don't get the attention and the help they got before, right? And then they cancel the contracts and they leave frustrated. I think that would be the worst decision. So I love to like just burn the boats and tell them straight on, and I think that was the best way to go.
Were there any customers that came from your original business and then were beneficiaries of your new product, or you started completely fresh?
I think that would be the wise choice, right? Finding something where you can leverage your existing customer base. as well as considering selling the agency first and then taking that kind of money and putting it into a new business would have been a wise decision as well, but we didn't do it. We didn't know better. So I think it was faster, but probably not the best way. For the first product that we tried to build, there was one customer. So the original idea came out of one project we did for a customer. But then we pivoted this to another kind of social media thing. And that's one, we started from scratch. So we really called from Audi to Zalando, all the customers in all the companies in Germany. And once we had them on the phone and talking about how they do social media, because we didn't know any social media managers out there, just one, right? It was an introduction. And then we called them and said, hey, can you tell us a little bit how your day looks like? What do you actually do, right? Can you show us how you do it, right? Maybe share your screen and like what are the biggest struggles that you have and what are things you would love to do but cannot do because there is no solution for it, stuff like that. And then in the end, we just said, hey, this was an awesome conversation. We learned so much. Thank you very much. If we can be of any help in any way, just tell us. And if you could be so kind and maybe introduce us to one or two more people from your space, because we don't know any, but we want to help and provide value, then most often they did. And so that's how we created the initial network. And we had like calls with 100 companies at least. So we learned a lot from them. And it was just by introduction. It was called I think there's something called the R model or pirate model, where you just get the referrals and that's how you build your network. And that's what we did.
I want to talk more about that in a minute, but I do want to go back to one decision that I think you said you didn't know to make, which was around selling the agency versus pivoting it. If you could do it over, would you have sold your original business? And how would you give advice to founders and owners now who may have to maybe in a similar position, and what should they be considering? What did you learn having gone through it that maybe they can avoid?
So if I think this is an interesting question, I would look at it as the buyer. And when I look at my business that I built originally and ask myself, would I buy this business? I would say probably not. Because it was heavily reliant on one person, which was me, right? Maybe two more key employees. And so that's not a good business to buy. And usually the agency businesses get a multiple of maybe 3-4 times, maybe EBITDA. So that's how they get valuated. So it wasn't a ton of money, but the selling process took us probably a year, I think, in terms of time. So it wouldn't be a wise choice for us. But if you know a competitor of yours who could really benefit from this, and your employees would be a great fit for them as well, right? And they could keep helping the customers, and the two businesses would flourish from each other and really benefit from each other, then I think that could be a really great idea. But I would look at it from the customer perspective, from the employee perspective. And if you can actually, if the trade for the time you had to invest to do the sale and the money you get in return, I would look at that. And if that sounds reasonable, it's probably a good way. For us, it probably wouldn't be a good way to do so. So thanks for the question.
That also brings up another interesting point, because you mentioned balancing your employees and what's good for them with the decision. And I can't imagine that every business decision is good for your employees. And so how do you take both of those into account?
So how we did do it is we were kind of a tech company, right? So we had developers, and me, Ollie, who was doing like the project management at that time, Basti, who was doing all the server stuff, and Felix, who was like our key developer there. And we were really honest with everybody, and we just told them that we want to create a better company and that this business model is not how we think we will get there. And then we offered everyone a choice, right? And the choice was they can switch with the customers to another great company who keeps doing what we're doing or have done. And they can stay, and we built a better business together. And those who wanted to stay, they stayed. And those who didn't want to, they just had a chance to like get to a bigger, better company than we have been.
It sounds like in your case, you made your decision for the business and then let your employees make a decision for themselves.
Absolutely. They always have, right? It's a two-sided contract. So every employee has more power than they might think.
That's an interesting insight.
It is. Because in the end, you as like when you build a company, you think I have to hire and get great people on board, but you have to provide something in order for those great people to stay on board, right? And if they just stay for half a year or something, they probably won't add the value to your business, because in half a year you just get started, right? You do some projects or write some lines of code, but the greatest people either bring insane amount of knowledge and have the chance to turn your business around in a year or two, right? Or they get better by every year, and if they don't, then you probably did something wrong.
So, and maybe this is more for the employees than for the founders, but I think it's important for founders and business owners to understand their employees as well, particularly for someone who has always been a founder, has always been a business owner, right? And you don't have the employee perspective necessarily. You said they have more power than they know. How should employees be thinking about that? And how can owners empower their employees and leverage that, right? Because I think you have a stronger and more productive relationship when everyone knows what their standing is, right?
So I don't know whether I have the best answer to this one, but if I would work in my company, what I would do is I would always talk to like my team lead or whatever, like the next step is look like. And I would ask him like, what does success look like for you? And for example, in order to earn this amount of money, what's the value I have to create in order to get there, right? So if you understand how the value chain works, and you align yourself to this one and really understand how you actually add value and what success looks like for like your team lead or your head of or your VP or the CEO or whoever you're working for, I think it makes things so much easier, and it gets like rid of so much pain that is in every company, because in the end, usually you have disaligned interests, and if you align those interests, everything becomes pretty clear pretty fast. So I would always like ask, how does success look like for you? And then actually do everything I can to make my boss or my teammate or whatever it is, right, successful. And you will probably never have an issue with your boss then. And I think that's the best way to rise in a company. And if you have the feeling like I've risen to the place where I do not enjoy the work anymore, go one step back, and no matter how much they pay you.
That's interesting too.
Yeah. There's this, I don't know the exact words for this theory, but there's something called people rise until the point where they actually are not good anymore at what they do, right? And I think that's something you can actually realize, right? And that's where the bad bosses come from. And actually going one step back is probably a wise decision, because it makes your life easier as well.
And so then how do you manage that from the top as well? How do you set up your business for success? Like, you have to not just think about, right? What I'm hearing is that you have to not just think about your business and your business goals, but how each person can contribute to that, and be very clear with them.
Yeah, I think that's probably the toughest thing in every business. At least it felt for me, because building a good product is really hard, right? For me, it came easier in the early days. It's completely different now, because like the product is like immense compared to what we did in the beginning. But finding the right people and promoting the right people, hiring the right people, and as well firing the wrong people, which is at least as important as hiring the right ones, I think is how you build a business. Because in the end, every business, you could create like hardware, software, whatever it is. In the end, a business is a bunch of people. And this bunch of people tries to create value for its customers. And you're using software, AI, hardware, whatever it is. If a company doesn't grow anymore and starts to die, it's probably because your people are not vested and don't care about the success of your customers anymore, and care more about internal stuff and their own success and their own salary and their own commission. And I think this is not as often this is probably more often in like when you have real management without founders in the company. And as long as you have some people in the company who are really doing this because they like to play the game and they just want to see the company grow and the people grow, I think at that times it's easier. And yeah, that's the toughest part, right? How do you find the right people and how do you get rid of the wrong people? And sometimes it's not as easy to see as you might think. I think the hardest and the toughest decision so far for me have always been around people. But the sooner I made them, the faster the growth was. And I should have probably every of those decisions I should have done earlier. Now is always the best time to do them.
And I know you posted a short recently about making those tough decisions about employees leaving the company. I'm wondering if you could talk more about how you learned that although those decisions and those conversations are hard, and it when someone leaves the company, it also has an impact on the rest of the employees who stay, right?
Yeah.
But can you talk more about how you realized how important it was to do that, to do it right and do it at the right time?
I think for me, this is the toughest thing, because on the one hand side, I had to learn how to follow this straight line and not to get defocused by all the emotions you have around it, because I actually care about all the people. And there's not a single person in the company that I ever hired that I would not have loved to stay in the company, right? Like every one of those, right? Every woman, every great man out there, right? All of them, I would have loved to stay in the company. And sometimes we had to fire them. Sometimes they left. But when I look back, I think the biggest mistakes were not to talk to them early on once I felt they are not a good fit anymore because the company changed and demanded something different from them where they could not adapt, right, in order to fill this gap. And then I created the most pain for those people because they could have worked in a different company where they felt like being at their natural best and grow and develop and not having a hard time as some of them had in our company, right? So those are the ones that I regret the most, if you could say it like that. And on the other hand, I think the decisions that took me the longest were those where someone was okay at the job, right? And they did a kind of good job, but not a great job, right? Not a hell yeah. And like changing this is where most of the greatness came from, and not accepting just good in some key positions and changing this, even if the people tried really hard, right? It was not because of their efforts. It was because of, I don't know, the toolkit they used, right? And somebody else brings a different toolkit and they use this one, maybe have even more attitude and drive for success, and they make it happen. So solving this and doing all the pieces in the puzzle, trying to put people in the right place so they can actually be successful, and the success then follows, the business success follows like the success of the people. I think that was like the most important part.
I'm wondering if you've kept in touch with some of those people who have left the company, and have you seen maybe they were struggling, or they weren't particularly happy, or they weren't productive at the level that you knew that they could be while they worked for you, and have you seen them go on and maybe it's not always a great thing when somebody's leaving a company, particularly if they're being asked to leave a company. Feel like I was part of a layoff. It definitely was rattling in the least. But have you seen them go on to better things, and seen their success in those other ways?
I think both are possible. Like everyone has their own journey, and sometimes so they are the ones to have to figure it out, and you're only there to like open the door and help them and try to give them honest feedback, right? There's this book about radical candor that some people hate and some love it, and I think sometimes you have to get challenging feedback actually to see something you haven't been seeing before. But on the other hand, it's tough, right? If you want to grow, leave your comfort zone is always tough. Development is something that's not easy to do, and that's why most people don't focus on it.
I think particularly at such a tumultuous time for technology, at least here in the United States where I am, and to see so many layoffs and people wondering where they're going to land. I just think it's interesting to hear your perspective in that way, and that, you know,
if one door closes, like two more open up. That's my motto. So I don't think that there's like something can be ruined, right? You can only think that something is ruined. You can only think, I don't have any chance now. I will never get hired again. There's no other job like this one, right? There are no other great colleagues like this one. And probably most of the problems, don't saying that it can be tough, right? It can be really tough, and being laid off is probably, I never experienced it, but I can imagine that it's really tough. But I think that there is this phase, once you got through it, you have to change how you think, because most of the time, the feeling you create in yourself comes from your thoughts. And if you think better thoughts, you will probably have a much easier way to see the opportunity in it as well, and find an even better job, an even better company, found your own company, right? Get self-sustained, create a small business, do a little e-commerce thing, do something with ChatGPT, right? Where a huge market is opening up at the moment. And if you are distracted by your daily business, you can't see all the opportunities out there. So taking yourself back and looking at it from some distance could be a really, really great gift. And that's one of the gifts you can get by getting laid off, right? You get time. And if you manage to get a step back, you're probably doing something you even enjoy more than you did before, right? And it's a different path now. I can see that. And that's a gift that you use wisely. And I think that's what it's all about.
Completely agree. Is that something that you've been able to do? I know you said you've never been laid off, right? You've been running businesses. Is that something that you've had the opportunity?
I almost got bankrupt a couple of times, but I don't know if that counts. That's like tough as well. But if it doesn't feel good, it doesn't mean that you cannot learn something from that, right? I think all those extreme feelings and situations are the ones that have the most value. Doesn't have to mean that you have to enjoy them, but it's where most of the value comes from, right? If you only have this, all the highs all the times, right? All the success all the time, probably you can't even enjoy it, right? In order to be able to enjoy it, you have to see the downturns as well, right? And all the great companies are getting built here, right? And not there.
What, talk a little bit more about some of those moments that you didn't enjoy, but what were those moments where you got to apply that mindset that you were just talking about, of looking at things in a different way? Is there a moment where you got to take a step back and think about your company or your direction?
So just to give you an example, I think it was May 2015. So we have been in the market for 1.5 years. So we got the first bunch of customers. We created this beta community with people that were able to like test the software and then do a decision whether they want to buy it or not. And we had like more expenses than we had revenue coming in, because we used like the money from the loan, right, that we got out of the agency. We got some investor money in there in the beginning to actually build a better company. And we were kind of running out of money. So we had, I think we had probably like 90 days left, and we had 60 days left, and we had 30 days left, and it got pretty ugly. And we saw that the product is something that's providing value, so the customers love to use it. And we just didn't manage to find the channel that worked to acquire new customers at the pace that we needed it, and for them, like transferring the money in the pace that we needed it to fuel like the cost of the company. And this was a really ugly situation. I can imagine like if you think of all the families and the people working in the company, and you are the only one seeing like the bank account going down, right? And you know how many days it is, right? And then you have to like not pay yourself salary in order to pay somebody else salary, right? Like stuff like that is not fun. But it forces you to think about better ways to do business. And for example, in that specific case, what we did is we changed the whole model from like try online, buy online, people paying by credit card and pay you just a month, and next month it renews, and then they pay you like for one more month. And we switched it to an upfront model where people have to close a contract for at least a year, pay you the whole year upfront. And that's how we switched the business within like 30 days, 60 days, in order to get like break even on a monthly base. Right. And then we had one more month, then we had 2 more months, and then we actually were trying to, oh my God, this seems to work, right? Actually, we got 1 more month, and then it like 3 months of runway, and that's how the business grew. And if we would not have been forced to do this in that pace, we would probably never switch this because the pain wasn't like hard enough. And now we have, I don't say this model is better, but it worked for us in a better way. And that's how the whole sales approach developed. And we were forced to build a sales team and do upfront payment in order to fuel the growth of the company, which was a really, really good thing to do in hindsight, but it didn't feel really nice the moment we had to do it.
I was going to ask, do you think if you hadn't been in that situation, would you have changed your model? But it sounds like...
No, it would have taken us at least half a year longer or a year, right? And we would have burned more money and like miss out on tons of customers. And that in that moment, we had to force like all the people from marketing and even some project guys, right, in order to do sales with us, because everyone had to be a salesperson in that moment, right? And everyone tried to sell the software because we really had to. If you want to have a job tomorrow, you have to do this, right? That's how it was. And that's the early struggles that probably most of the bigger businesses don't have. And it's something that is kind of a pain reliever if you don't have a situation like that. But there are, in every startup journey that I know, usually you have like 3, 4, 5, at least 5 of those moments, because that's how you learn.
What was the moment after you made that switch, and you said you had 1 month, and you had 2 months, you had 3 months runway? What was the moment where you finally thought, okay, this is going to work? How long did it take you to come out of like fight or flight, right? And go back to thinking about growth?
So I think like kudos to one of my partners, Oliver. He did like most of the sales in the early days, and so there was this discussion between us. And once we did the switch to the product business, it was like, okay, so one of us has to do sales, the other one is going to be CEO, right? I don't care, choose whatever you like, right? He said, I never be CEO. Then you have to do sales, right? I hate sales. I will never do sales, right? This was our discussion for at least, I don't know, half a year or something. And he had to do it, right? Because what's the other option, right? No money. So that's not an option. And then he actually had to train himself to become an awesome sales guy. And he really did. So he learned it from scratch. I taught him how to do his first offer, right? Because he never written an offer, probably. And he became one of the best sales guys, like at least that I have seen so far. It was incredible because he put in the hours. He hustled really hard in the beginning. He learned from every kind of sales guy out there, right? And he actually did one more call every day. And that's how he became great. And on the other side, right, it wasn't something he wanted to do forever. So he stopped it at a certain point in the business and did something different. But it actually enabled us to build a sales team that then could catch up with the revenue he was creating. And that's something I'm incredibly, incredibly thankful for, that he took on this one, because I bet this was at least as big of a struggle as for me, like looking at like the dollar signs on the bank account going down every month before we did the switch.
It sounds like it benefited your business to have at least one of you doing these roles, particularly early on when you don't have a huge team, you haven't built a team yet. I'm wondering how much of a benefit you think it is for the owners to also be able to do the work of the business, whatever it is. So if it's building product, writing code, acting as the head of sales, head of marketing, things like that. Which parts do you think, how close to the business do these roles need to be for it to be important for you to be able to do them? Maybe that's a convoluted question, but.
So I think a founder actually has no job and all jobs. in the beginning, because I think I had every job in this company, at least in the early days, right? Whether it was marketing or sales or customer support, right? Our customers were calling me in the middle of the night, says, "Oh, the software is not working. Oh, let me help you," right? So there was like, I don't know, kind of every job that you are able to do. And on the other hand, an investor would never work, or probably they won't work in the company, right? So if you call them owners of the company, or I don't know, somebody who puts in the money, then they don't have an operational role. But the founders that have an operational role in the business kind of have every role in the beginning. And because their main goal is not doing sales or doing marketing, but building the business, right? And the main piece that's missing is your biggest job, right? How, like, overcoming this obstacle, it's always your job in the end. And usually you do this until you figured out a way how to do it, and then hand it over to somebody who can do it actually better than you. And if you can afford it, right, hire somebody like early on that can do it better than you. But most of the time you don't have the money. So you have to do it in a way and figure it out because it's cheaper, right? And then kind of figure it out in a way that you can hand it over so that people don't fuck it up and they actually can work on this space and make it better. And yeah, that's how you hire like the first, the second, the third, the fourth, the fifth employee. And it's like one-on-one, like this job, then the next one, then the next one, then it's marketing, then it's sales, then it's whatever. And if you have 2 or 3 founders in the team in the beginning, I think it makes some things easier and some things harder, right? It makes it easier because you have more people that are in the best case scenario tied to the success of the business, and they want to see it grow, and they want to like enable like building this company, and they have the same dream and passion and image in their head where they want to go, and they do everything they have to do in order to get it there, to match their goals. But on the other hand, if you have old people like that say, I'm only doing sales, I'm only doing this, I'm only doing this, right, and somebody else has to do it, then it will probably fail. So there has to be a lot of agility in there, and then like leveraging the main skills that people have. So probably I saw the founders who call themselves developers who had to end up doing sales, and vice versa, which is not always the best idea, but I think it's possible, because if it's your only option, it's your best option.
So interesting. There's so much more there to dig into of how you make those decisions, when you make those decisions, hiring people who are smarter at things than you are at them yourself. Which I think is the perfect place to pick up.
That's a great quote from like one of my mentors. He's called like Oliver Gajek, and he always said, "As CEO, it's your job to become the dumbest person in the room." And I think that's a really wise thing to think about and consider.
I think that's a great place to start for next time.
Cool. Let's do that.
Next time. That's awesome. Thank you.
Thanks. Have a great day.